This season at Magnolia Market, we did a lot of oversized installations using preserved and dried florals. Those were really huge and three-dimensional, but we're gonna show you how to simplify and make a two-dimensional art piece for yourself. Today we're gonna talk about pressing flowers and how to create some easy artwork for your home. Pressing flowers is a really old traditional method of preserving flowers. This is a great way when the seasons are kind of winding down and ending to take what is blooming and beautiful outside and preserve it.
This is a great way to keep them alive and admire them in your home.
You may have seen florals like this in your grandmother's home. This was something that was really popular in the 70s, but it's definitely making a comeback now. We're gonna show you a little bit more modern way to approach it. And also we're gonna be showing you materials that you can use that are archival, meaning that they'll last for a long time to come with your preserved floral. So let's get started with this project. If you are in an area where you can go out foraging, do that. Maybe flowers are not as accessible to you. You can go to the florist and you can get some really cool ones. In fact, this goldenrod is something that is available at just about any florist you'll go to. And also if you're living in the Midwest, you'll probably see fields of this around this autumn time of year that you can definitely go and get some of this for free. This is a really cool one because it has all these different little branches, it has leaves, it has blooms. It's gonna be really interesting to press. If you are foraging for your own florals, look for something that's interesting to you. Make sure it's not anything poisonous, obviously, but things with an interesting leaf pattern, interesting blooms, those are great. We also wanna look for something that has a stem that can be pressed. So usually not something with a woody stem. That's gonna make things just a little bit more difficult for us. Also, if you're foraging florals that are larger, something that has a face, like one of these ranunculus over here near Megan, these are great because you can put the face down to press it, and it'll be really, really beautiful. Something like a rose that's a little bit more cupped is probably gonna be a little more challenging to press. There's just a lot more volume there that's gonna take a lot more time and effort. So whether you're foraging or you're going to the florist, get a large variety of plants. Get things that have leaves, get things that have flowers, get things in different shapes. Get lots of different variety, and that will make this process really exciting and fun. So we're gonna start pressing our florals. We're gonna be using this old thrifted book, and the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna see how our floral fits in our book, which is going to also be our flower press. Since this doesn't quite fit, I'm gonna trim it a little bit. So I'm gonna be careful with how I trim this, because I'm gonna show you a way that you can harvest multiple kind of fun pieces of a flower like this. I think that these will also look really cute pressed. So I'm gonna cut them and I'm gonna press them separately in another part of the book. You can press multiple florals in one book. It's totally fine. We're just gonna stack a ton of weight on top of it. So now that we've got that on there and it looks like everything's gonna fit, what we're gonna do, especially if this is a book that we're really concerned about any blotchy moisture getting on the pages, is we're just gonna insert a piece of newsprint in there. This can actually also help us to get a good press. So I'm gonna arrange it on my newsprint that is roughly the same size as the page. Close that little envelope, and then really get that corner into the corner of my book. Close it up. It's okay if there's a little leaf hanging out. Sometimes that's just a good reminder, like, hey, you pressed this 6 months ago in this book, and it's still in here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do this in the book that's resting on top, but I'm gonna open it up. And this one, I'm just gonna put the goldenrod the cuts that I have straight into the book. I'm not gonna worry about newsprint because I don't care about this book, though it is providing me a good service. Okay, and these you don't really have to worry about arranging as much. They're just kind of like do their thing. So now that we have our goldenrod, in our books, we really want to make sure that there's an adequate amount of weight on these. Weight and time, those are the things that are going to make this really cool. So we're going to add at least 4 more books to the top, but as many as you have room to do, I recommend. So if I had this at home, I would probably stack a couple more books on the top, to be honest. And then I usually just carry it to a shelf somewhere, put it aside, and let it sit. 2 months is a good amount of time to leave them. Any time before then, they may not be fully dried. And if they're not fully dried, they may mold in their frame. So we want to make sure that they are fully dried so that they are well preserved. You can leave them for longer than 2 months. I definitely have ones that I have forgotten about and found years later, and it's okay. It's totally fine. There's a lot of forgiveness with this method, but at least 2 months.
We can also look at, if you decide to use an actual flower, how to press those. And you can do it face down, so the actual face is gonna go flat, or we can look at its side profile. So for this one, I really like the gesture that it already has going sideways. So at this point, you would put your newsprint down if you are worried about your book, but I'm not. This guy is specifically for printing florals. So since we're looking at his side profile, you're just gonna lay him down. And I'm gonna give him just a little extra help and fold him over. But just gonna give him a little help as I close the pages to keep him as flat as possible. If I weren't doing this, flowers could get a little wrinkled, or they're gonna end up covering the stem and this gesture and the leaves that have are really pretty, and I don't wanna cover that up. So I am going to hold him and close that. And I'm gonna snip his stem. Great.
Cool.
And we'll stack books on top of him as well.
Cool. Maybe let's put one more on
One
that
more?
big guy. Yeah. That's great. So now that your flower is fully pressed, fully dried, it's time to mount it onto whatever you choose, and then we're gonna put it in a frame so that it can hang on your wall forever.
We're gonna mount it onto watercolor paper because it's a nice, clean background with a slight texture and very easily accessible to us.
So we need to start with our frame because that is going to tell us what size we need to make everything. I always like to put a piece of paper out on my table. It helps not to scuff or mar your frame and also helps to protect that glass. So lay it face down, and then you want to lift your backing out, and then you can measure the size that you'll need for mounting.
So I'm just gonna use the backing and lay it straight onto my piece of watercolor paper in a corner, so that's less than I have to cut. And we're gonna take our pencil and we're just gonna outline it so we know the size that we need to cut. Great, so we'll just cut out what we're gonna mount our flower on.
So we're using watercolor paper. It's a great archival grade paper. We really like it because it tends to be a little bit denser than regular paper, and you definitely want something that's a little bit stiffer so that it can stand up to the weight of the flower you're gonna be mounting on it. It also has a little bit of texture, which is really nice, I find. If you're looking for something else that maybe is a different color or is smoother, matte board is a great option. Cardstock can be great too. Okay, so we bought a frame that has a mat inside of it. So we're kind of gonna just do a little test here and look at how it looks with the mat. What do you think? Too squeezed? Or do you think that would be cool?
I don't know,
And let's look at it without the mat now too.
I like the length of the stem that's bare, and I'd hate to have to chop it off.
Yeah.
Makes it look a little more naturally grown. Just a full visual.
I think that's pretty.
I think that's pretty too.
So we're gonna lose the frame.
Cool.
All right. You take it away.
Okay, so now we're gonna actually adhere our botanicals to the paper.
I'm just gonna help Megan get prepped by pouring a little bit of this glue into a dish for her.
We're gonna use the archival glue and also this tape. Both are necessary because the adhesive is going to be applied through the entire back, and it's gonna keep it pretty sturdy onto the paper. The tape is visually appealing. It goes partially with the aesthetic, but also to keep some of those flyaways down. So I'm gonna go ahead and pre-cut some of my tape just so I have it on hand. I'm just doing little 1/8 inch, maybe 1/4 inch slices. You can go thicker if you so desire. So next we are going to apply the adhesive to the flower. So we're gonna flop it onto the side that we don't wanna see. We grabbed 2 different sizes of brushes so we can get those tiny detailed spots with the smaller brush, and then also use this little bit bigger brush to cover more surface area. So what I'm gonna do is, this glue is just a little thick to where I don't wanna apply it straight to it or it's gonna be a little gloppy. So I brought this water just to slightly dip my brush in and just water it down the tiniest, ever so slightly, just so it's more easily applicable to my botanicals. So you're just gonna brush lightly, gently. This is a live dried floral, so it is a little vulnerable, so you wanna be very careful. So at this point, I covered most of the large surfaces. I'm just gonna go in with my tiny brush to get the little minor details, make sure that those guys don't fly away. So very carefully, we're gonna pick up our newly sticky dried floral, and we are gonna place it exactly where we want it on the paper. So we already laid it out and kind of saw where we want it. Center. I'm gonna try to do so without shifting it on the paper because we don't wanna get our adhesive everywhere. So I feel like that's pretty center.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna gently tap them down with my fingers. So to activate the tape, I'm just gonna dip my finger in a little bit of the water and slightly apply it to the back. That's gonna make it very sticky. And I would say I like about right here how it's right ahead of the leaves. You don't want it too close to the bottom because realistically, if you stuck something down here, it's really not gonna hold it up. So I'm gonna come right underneath that big first leaf. And I would say I'm looking at where this guy could potentially come off. He's probably top heavy. I would say that right here is a great spot in this negative space. Yes, and it's, as you could have seen, it was naturally slightly pulling up off of the paper, so that's a great place to tack it down.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna slide it under there. I think we can hold her up and make sure she's stuck to the paper. Great.
It looks great.
Not falling over. No flyaways.
It looks really solid.
Yeah, it does. If this were bigger and there were more like flues going, we could add at the tip of a leaf or at the stem of another larger leaf, another piece of tape. But this guy's a little bit smaller, so he's a little less maintenance. So we have pressed and mounted our flower. Now we are going to go into step 3 and frame it. So we've chosen not to use our mat because we want the full watercolor paper shown. So we're just gonna hope that our goldenrod stays on. Lay them down in there.
So we want to make sure that our hanging mechanism is on the top, and we'll just toss that backboard back in and fold down all of our little prongs.
Great. Now that all the prongs are tucked down, we have our finished goldenrod mounted on our watercolor paper.
That looks really pretty.
It does look really pretty. It's very simple, but also a great statement.
This is another pressed botanical that we did earlier in the spring, and we put them in the same frames, and I feel like they look great next to each other.
Even
So-
a third with a similarly sized stem would be great.
Yeah, or if you wanted to do something like more eclectic and different sized frames, we also have that really cool vintage frame.
Oh yeah, here's another example of some goldenrod. A little bit different because it doesn't have the mounting step. But this guy's really pretty too.
I think this one definitely feels a little bit more vintage, like
Yeah.
stuff that you would see at the thrift store or something, but
Yeah.
it's really cool to just kind of plop something in there and
Yeah.
see how it looks.
I would want to add this to a gallery wall.
Yeah, those could actually look super cute next to each other.
Oh, true.
Yeah, I like the
I like-
different shape.
Yeah.
It's fun. So we've pressed our florals, we've mounted them on our piece of cardstock or watercolor paper, and we've put them in our frame. I really love this result.
I do too. It's beautiful and it's gonna last a long time hanging on your wall.
We hope that you have a lot of fun going out, gathering different florals, experimenting with what they can become, and pressing your own flowers at home.